Episode 5. The rain outside Singhania Towers had slowed to a soft drizzle, leaving the city of Mumbai shrouded in a damp haze. In the sleek conference room of the building's uppermost floor, Naina Kapoor sat across from Aditya Singhania, her posture tense and her hands folded in her lap. The silence between them was thick, punctuated only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. "I've considered your offer," Naina began, her voice steady but laced with reluctance. "I'll choreograph the performance for your anniversary event." Aditya leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I'm glad to hear that. But," she added quickly, "I have conditions." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Naina straightened, meeting his gaze. "I want complete creative control over the choreography. No interference, no suggestions from your team." "Agreed," Aditya said without hesitation. Her eyes narrowed. "And I'll need your assurance that this performance will highlight the art, not just serve as a backdrop to your corporate celebration." "You have my word," Aditya replied. His tone was calm, but there was a quiet determination in his voice. Naina studied him for a moment, trying to gauge his sincerity. Finally she nodded. "Fine. I'll start tomorrow." As she rose to leave, Aditya stood as well. "Naina," he said, his voice softer now. "Thank you." She paused at the door, glancing back at him. "Don't thank me yet." The following morning, Naina arrived at the grand rehearsal hall provided by Singhania Industries. The space was unlike anything she had ever worked in, sprawling, with polished wooden floors, floor-to-ceiling mirrors, and state-of-the-art sound equipment. Yet, its opulence only heightened her sense of unease. This wasn't her studio, where every corner carried memories of her struggles and triumphs. Here, she felt like a guest in someone else's world. Aditya entered shortly after, dressed in a crisp white shirt and tailored trousers. He looked every bit the composed businessman, but there was a slight awkwardness in the way he lingered near the doorway. "I wasn't sure if you needed anything to get started," he said, gesturing to the room. "I have everything I need," Naina replied, her tone clipped. She busied herself arranging her notes, deliberately avoiding his gaze. Aditya nodded and moved to a corner, observing silently as Naina began warming up. Her movements were fluid, each step and gesture carrying a precision born of years of discipline. For a moment, Aditya forgot the purpose of the collaboration and found himself simply watching her. "What are you doing?" Naina's voice broke through his thoughts. Aditya blinked, realizing she was addressing him. "I was just watching." "Well, don't," she said sharply. "If you're going to be here, make yourself useful. Adjust the music settings." Aditya arched an eyebrow but complied, moving to the control panel. As he fumbled with the unfamiliar system, Naina couldn't suppress a small laugh. "You don't seem like the type to handle sound equipment," she teased, her tone softening. Aditya smirked. "And you don't seem like the type to work with billionaires. Yet here we are." For the first time, Naina allowed herself to smile. Touché. As the days turned into weeks, Naina and Aditya settled into an uneasy rhythm. She threw herself into the choreography, working with dancers handpicked for the event. Aditya, to her surprise, often stayed to observe, though he rarely interfered. Instead, he asked questions about the stories behind the movements, the cultural significance of certain gestures, the emotions the performance was meant to convey. At first, Naina found his presence intrusive, but gradually, she came to appreciate his curiosity. He wasn't just a passive observer. He genuinely wanted to understand. One afternoon, during a break in rehearsals, Aditya approached her with a hesitant expression. "I've been reading about baritanidium," he said. "The philosophy behind it is fascinating. The idea of expressing emotions through movement. It's remarkable." Naina looked at him surprised. "I didn't think you'd be interested in something like that." "There's a lot you don't know about me," Aditya replied, his voice tinged with a quiet sadness. Intrigued, Naina pressed him. "What do you mean?" Aditya hesitated, his gaze distant. "When I was younger, my mother wanted me to learn music. She said it would give me a way to express myself. But my father thought it was a waste of time. He wanted me to focus on the family business." "And what did you want?" Naina asked gently. Aditya's lips curved into a faint, rueful smile. "It didn't matter. My life was decided for me long before I had a say in it." For a moment, Naina saw past the polished exterior to the man beneath. A man burdened by expectations and regrets. It reminded her of her own fears, the constant pressure to prove herself in a world that often dismissed her passion as frivolous. You know, she said softly, it's never too late to rediscover what makes you happy. Aditya met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Maybe, he said almost to himself. Despite their growing understanding of each other, tension still flared. Naina's perfectionism often clashed with Aditya's need for control, and their arguments became a familiar part of the rehearsal process. One evening, after a particularly heated exchange about the placement of the stage lighting, Naina threw up her hands in frustration. Why do you insist on meddling in things you don't understand? I'm not meddling, Aditya shot back. I'm ensuring this event reflects the standards of Singhania Industries. Art doesn't conform to corporate standards. Naina retorted. You can't measure it in profits and projections. Aditya ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to support you, but you make it impossible. Maybe because your idea of support feels like control, Naina said, her voice trembling with emotion. You don't trust me to do my job. Aditya stared at her, his expression softening. That's not true. Then prove it, Naina whispered. For a moment, they stood in silence, the air between them charged. Finally, Aditya sighed. You're right. I'll back off. Just let me know if you need anything. Naina nodded, her anger subsiding. Thank you. As the event drew closer, their partnership deepened. Aditya shared more about his estranged relationship with his father and the pressures of running the family empire. Naina, in turn, confided her fears of failure and the weight of her students' expectations. In their shared vulnerability, they found a surprising sense of comfort. The boundaries between them blurred, and though neither dared to acknowledge it, an unspoken bond began to form. On the eve of the anniversary celebration, Naina stood on the empty stage, gazing out at the grand venue. Aditya joined her, his hands in his pockets. It's going to be incredible, he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. I hope so, Naina replied. For both our sakes. Aditya looked at her, a rare warmth in his eyes. It already is. As they stood together, the storm within each of them seemed to calm, if only for a moment.